Hey guys, so we're going to go into the muscles, but before we do that, we're going to need a shoulder girdle. So I'm going to just put this in really quickly. I know that we've covered this previously, so let's zoom through this as fast as we can go. So proportions of the shoulder girdle, we're saying are half of the rib cage. I usually compare it to the rib cage because it sits on the rib cage, or you could compare it to the sternum. Either which way, it's half the height of the rib cage 1/2 heads, so that means this is 3/4 of a head. But because we're working with the arm here, we can say, well, the humerus is 1/2 heads, so then our scapula is going to be half the length of our humerus. So something like this, and then we know it's going to be a triangular bone, we know it's going to be curvy, and also, by the way, the width is somewhat comparable to the height. So even though it's triangular, you could fit it in fairly well into a box, I would say. So just make this triangular. So this is the front, so we're going to be moving through the back, through there. Common thing with the scapula, by the way, is people make it kind of like 90 degrees to the body. You want it to follow the line of the rib cage. That's going to give you that angle in through there. And then if you're looking at it from the side view, it's also following the curvature of the rib cage. So something like that. And then I probably need to move it more over through here. Okay, like that. This will also have a slight curve, by the way. This is the medial border, so we're interested in that line. And then let's just look for the spine of the scapula through here. That's going to be the bony landmark. So that's important, super important. So that line important. And then let's just figure this out. So the spine of the scapula is important all the way around, but as this comes around to the side, even though it's still part of the same movement, we stop calling it the spine of the scapula, we start to call it the acromion process, this being a crucial bony landmark of the body. So then all we're going to need is pump this up. Okay, this is what we would call the glenoid cavity. That's that pocket that the humerus articulates with. And then as we get into the arm, there is going to be one other little point that it's not a bony landmark, but it's really important for us to understand. And that is the coracoid process. So that triangle is going to be coming, that top triangle coming a little bit more up and down. And then as that crashes down, there's a point about there. That's going to be where our coracoid process is coming out. Its name coming from the word for crow, so this is like a crow's beak sticking through the body. Reason why it's important when we're looking at the arm is because the biceps attaches to it, as does the coracobrachialis, which is a much less important muscle. So something like this, big old hook sticking right the way through the body. So there you go, that's our scapula, more or less. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that we need. Now, as I've put the scapula in place through here, one thing I really want you to understand with the humerus, so I can actually tweak the bone as I've got it through here, because what I want to do, a lot of people miss this, but it's super important when it comes to working the shoulders, working the deltoids. The humerus is pointing backwards towards the scapula, right? Let me really crank that so we can see what's happening there. When we get onto legs, we'll see that the femur points forwards, right? But this pushing backwards of the humerus is important because when you look at the shoulder on a human, the shoulder is bulging out forwards and then it's flat on the back. That is coming from the movement of the humerus angling back towards the scapula. So something like that. Feel like that's a little bit stretched out. Let's hit it something like that. But anyway, let's say we're happy with that, and then we'll throw in, I'm just going to noodle it a little bit, and then we'll throw in a scapula. Clavicle. Jesus, look. If I'm not getting those names right by now, then you're not going to either, so don't worry about it. So here I'm going to make my scapula out of my ulna, because they're both long bones. All of these are long bones, which means they all have similar patterns, i.e. they are thinner in the middle, flare out at either end. Proportion-wise, clavicle, I don't generally work with the proportions of the clavicle, because I kind of go, well, look, it's going to have to hit my scapula through there, right? The acromion process comes around, hugs the clavicle. It's crazy how everyone gets this wrong all the time. Like they'll have the clavicle coming in underneath or sitting on top or whatever. This is a joint here, the bones are touching, and the acromion process is coming around outside, but the clavicle itself is higher, right? So there is that drop down through there. Now, the reason why I don't work with the proportions of the clavicle so much is I go, well, through this end, it's got to be articulating with the sternum. This end, it's got to touch the scapula. So I just kind of squash it between those two things. But you could use a check. You could say it's about 2/3 of a head, something like that. And then a crucial thing that you've got to understand with your clavicle is that S-curve, which you're not so likely to see from the front view. So a lot of people miss it. But there's that S-curve. It's curved that way because it's curving around the shape of the neck there. And then clavicle fatter on the inside, thinner on the outside. You don't really need to know that, but it's not bad knowledge to have for sure. God, it's looking like a party balloon at the moment. Okay, let's just control this a little bit. All right, and then it's a fairly flat bone from the front, so let's just flatten that down. Okay, something like that, and then maybe I'm going to inflate it more at that end. Yeah, so something like this, right, in a very basic sense. So there's our shoulder girdle, clavicle and scapula. Then I'm just going to allow my arm bones to rotate outwards a little bit to give us a more relaxed position. And then we are going to start looking at some tasty muscle action. So we will start with looking at the deltoids and then work our way down the arm.